This is the video answer for the exercise 1 of Project Kraken. So this exercise is in multiple parts where we're going to explore different methods to attach or get client managed. So we have here the first part, which would be using remote push. Then we're going to use a local import of the Sylink XML, which is the configuration file for communication. And then after that, we're going to import the Sylink using a tool called Sylink Drop. And finally, we're going to work with a Linux client to get also this client managed. So without further ado, let's get started with the first part. So we are now on SEPMO 1 and we're going to use the remote push option to get the first client managed. So we're just going to click install client. I'm going to use create a package for Windows client. Next. We want the client to be attached and managed from the default group, and we're going to click next. Choosing remote push. Here we browse the network, so we can see we have here our Solicel network, and we're going to select the first machine, which is CWS01. You're prompted to log in, so here we're using the domain account for administrator. So use the password as documented in the lab guide, and write the Solicel for the domain. Okay, so now we see that the client is added. Okay. That's a Windows 10 machine with SEP 14 installed but unmanaged. So we're going to click next and send. Okay, so the package has been pushed. So the communication upload is successful. So not only the package made it across, but also the client managed to make its first heartbeat back to the management console. So if I'm going now to the default group, I can see I have my WCWS01 client, which is online. So let's move to part 2, where we're going to use a local installation of the Sylink XML. So for the second part of this exercise, you need to connect to WCWS02, open Internet Explorer, browse to the SEPM console. So we're going here to SEPM01 column 1990. We're going to launch the web console and authenticate with the credentials that were provided. So from the web console, once we actually initialize the console, we need to retrieve the Sylink XML file, which is the communication file for getting a client managed. We're going to the client group. We're going to default group. We right click on this and we just go export communication settings. We save it, so click export, we click save, and we see we have on the download my company Sylink XML. Okay, so now let's go to open our SEP client. We click on help, troubleshooting, click on communication settings, import. So something that's quite important to notice here is that to have access to that button, your account needs to have administrative right on the system. So here the student account is a domain account, but it has a local administrator's right also on the system. This is why we have that button. So I'm going to click import. We browse to the download folder, select the file, click open, and wait a few moments for the client to convert from self-managed to managed. So now you can see that the management server is SEPMO1. It's no longer written self-managed. We have a policy serial number, meaning that we have received the configuration that's centrally managed. And we see that it is actually on the default location. So if I'm going back to my web console here, I click refresh. And now I should see my second client. Okay, so you may notice that the first few heartbeats you don't have all the information yet, because some stuff is still transiting into the server. You have to wait a few minutes before all the policy is correctly set up and all the information is transited to the server. But the most important is that now we have actually our second client, which is managed. So let's move to the third method, which is using an additional tool. So this would be useful if you had actually many systems and you wanted to actually script the tool. So the tool is called Sailing Drop. So let's move on to the next part. So for this third time, we just went ahead and already opened the SEPM console. So I'm just going to the default group, right click, export the communication settings and save them into my download folder. Okay, so far same instruction as on the previous method. Now we're going to fetch the Sailing Drop tool, and that's what you would use if you are going with a script. The tool is always in the same place on the install folder for the SEP client. So we're going here on C, program files. If you had 64, it would be program file x86. Then you go to Symantec, endpoint protection. Then you have the version here. So we're just going on that path. Then we're going to the bin folder and we look for Sailing Drop. So we double click to open the tool. And we are going to browse to get our Sailing XML. So it was, if you remember, on the download folder. We click open. And then we click update Sailing. Now we have a pop-up saying that the Sailing has been successfully replaced. We're going to open our SEP client. And you already see that you have the green dot, so it means that the client is already managed and talking to the SEP manager. So we're going to open the client to confirm this. So we're going to help, troubleshooting. We can see the management server, so this time we have the IP address. We have the group, so we are on default group, okay? And we see policy serial number, so it means that we received settings and configuration that are centrally managed. So let's close that, go back to the management console here, using the web console, refresh. And we see that we have a third client that's now managed. So that's the multiple method you can actually convert unmanaged client to managed. You could also make a fresh installation with the package and have the Sailing as part of the package. That's what happens when you export the package or push it from the SEPM. And then you do not need this. This is just in case you install from the DVD and then you want to get the client managed. Okay. So in the next section, we're going to look at SEP for Linux. For the last part of this exercise, we are going to connect to a Linux client using XRDP. So we need just a remote desktop client. And even though you might have direct access to the VM, please use the method that's described in the lab guide so you have the exact same desktop and the same user experience as what is described here. So we are logged as the domain administrator on WSLUA, which is our domain controller incidentally. We are going to open the shortcut LCWS01 on the desktop. This opens a remote desktop connection. So it goes in full screen. You can see here you're prompted for a password. So the password here is train. We might have an error for the first connection. So just click OK. Enter the password the second time, train, and then you have access. And we're going to open the browser to export the Sailing XML, the same way as we did on part 2 and 3 of this exercise. We need to access a web console. A few differences in here is that you might see actually some warnings. So we're just going to continue and discard those warnings. So we're just going to launch the web console here. You can see we go to Advanced, Add Exception, confirm the security exception. We log in with the credentials that were provided. Okay, so we go directly to the client view, select default group, and like we did on Windows, so we go Export Communication Settings, Export, and we click Save to have it in our download folder. Okay, so very similar to what we did in Windows. So just going to reduce the console. Okay, so it's here in the taskbar. I'm gonna need it later on. Now we're going to open the terminal. So here I double click on Mate Terminal. We're going to open the file browser also. So we're going to click on Students Home here. We're going to our download folder, and we need to rename the file because it needs to be specifically called Siling.xml. So you can see here the file has my company, default group, so on. So just have to go right click, rename. Easy enough. We highlight what we don't want, and then we can delete just to have the name Siling.xml. So let's leave this aside and have the terminal on the other side. Okay. So from the terminal, you will need to type a few commands to go and import that Siling.xml. So we're going to type cd /opt /Symantec antivirus. One thing, if you're not very familiar with Linux, so there's autocomplete, so you can type just the first few letters. Be careful, it's case sensitive, so the first time the first Symantec is S uppercase, and after that it's lowercase. And then you press tab and it continues to type the rest for you. Okay, so now we are in the correct folder. Okay, we are on the OPT Symantec antivirus. Now we're going to launch and invoke the command that's called savmanage to import the Siling.xml. So there's multiple switches that are documented. So we just need to type the command sudo /sav -manage -i for import, and then space. What comes after that is where the Siling.xml is. So to save you some typing, you actually have on the side here the download folder with your file that you rename Siling.xml. You just drop in it, drag and drop. So now you have the whole path that's typed for you. You just have to press enter. It asks you for the password for student. So the password is train. And you see that now you have import successful. So the next task you need to type is to check if you have actually that policy serial number, if the client is managed and configured to report to the management server. So again, /sav manage -p. And sure enough, you can see here we have a policy serial number. So it shows that the client is managed and it received policies and configuration. So if I'm going to expand and restore my web console, I go and click refresh. I'm seeing now my Linux client here. Okay, so I can go on the properties, and you see that this client is actually running Ubuntu desktop. So this concludes exercise 1 of Project Kraken.